there, Banditos. It's Wednesday, and you know what that means? Well, a couple of things, actually. It's the end of summer vacation. Boo-hoo. Labor Day has passed. We hope everyone had a great one, and all our kids are going back to school. That's awesome. But more importantly, there's a new episode of the Dollar Bin Bandits coming right at you. But before we get to that, let's get to the intros. I am Joe Marcello.
I'm Mike Farah.
And as always, Bree bring you the latest and greatest, the hard-hitting interviews. As what do? We fling open those doors of your local comic book shop, and we interview your favorite creators of yesterday and today. But before we do that, let's not forget to thank our sponsor, Tomorrow's Publishing. That's TWOMORROWS.com. Go there, check it out. Sign up, subscribe. You won't forget it.
Today's guest is none other than Ron Marz. Ron has been on the show now 4 times, one away from getting his Dollar Bin Bandits 5-timers jacket. We have to create it, so we can't have him on until it's done, but I'm assured that will happen. Anyway, today we are discussing his new project with frequent collaborator Ron Lim. It's called Silver Surfer Rebirth Legacy. And this is the 3rd in a series of miniseries with that Rebirth branding. This time, really concentrating on Genis-Vell, who is the son of the original Captain Marvel, who is known by the name Legacy. And, Ron tells us as much as he can about the new series, which, by the way, comes out today. But it was a really great chat. I always love to talk to Mr. Marz, and he had a lot of interesting things to say.
Yeah, we always love talking to Ron. We've gotten to meet him now a couple of times in person at signings at Terrificon. He's been on our show a few times, so I will comfortably say he is a friend of the show. And it's always great to see what he has going on. So let's not waste any time. Let's get right to it. This is our interview with Ron Marz.
Is here. Ron, how are you?
I'm well. 5-timers get a jacket, right? Is that the deal?
Yes.
We're working on it.
All right. Good deal.
Then there's gold watch territory after that. So.
Oh boy.
Cool.
We'll cross that bridge.
I mean, nobody actually wears watches anymore, but okay.
No. Well, yeah.
It's just for the look.
It doesn't work, so don't worry. It's okay.
We were hoping Ron's compatriot Ron Lim would be here. Unfortunately, there may be some miscommunication. Maybe he'll show up later in the episode. We never know. But we'll get him back on here eventually. But we are here to talk about the new Rebirth series, the 3rd in the series, which is called Silver Surfer Rebirth Legacy. But before we get on to that subject, I wanted to kind of revisit a piece of slightly unfinished business from our last interview where we talked about Warlock and Warlock Rebirth, which at that time, the 3rd Guardians of the Galaxy movie had not come out. We did not know very much about what the character of Adam Warlock would be like in that series. And so I was curious, Mr. Ron Marz, what you thought of Guardians of the Galaxy 3, but particularly the portrayal of Adam Warlock in that movie.
I'll let you know once I see it.
Anticlimactic.
Touché.
I haven't actually seen it yet. One of the deep dark secrets of doing this for a living is you don't have as much time to consume this stuff as you do when you're not doing it. So so I didn't manage to get to the theaters, and I haven't taken the time to watch it on Disney yet. I assume it's on Disney now.
It is now.
So yeah, I want to get caught up on it, but there's been no opportunity. Too many deadlines, too many concerts, too many softball games. I'm a busy Renaissance man. I gotta parse out my time.
What concerts did you go to?
I just went to Ghost on Saturday.
Ooh, cool. Has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but it's still cool, man. That's awesome.
I mean, this is the summer everybody's on the road, so
yeah.
Ghost, Jason Isbell, The Cure, Goo Goo Dolls, Philadelphia Orchestra at the local Summer Shed.
Nice.
just a bunch. So
My cousin saw Metallica and rubbed it in my face, and I'm not talking to him now, but that's okay.
and this Thursday and Friday I got Smashing Pumpkins and Pixies. So
Oh,
that's awesome.
now you got me interested. Not that the others didn't do it for me, but those two
That's
really
very cool.
set my beard on fire.
All right, well, let's get back to the comic book talk, shall we? So you're completing the trilogy you started with Silver Surfer Rebirth, and this time focused on Legacy. Why does this story and specifically Genis-Vell, if I pronounce it correctly, make sense as kind of next to tackle in the series?
Well, I mean, do you want the honest answer or do you want the PR answer? I mean, the honest answer is we had to come up with a title to differentiate it from Silver Surfer Rebirth. So this is Silver Surfer Rebirth Legacy, because Genis-Vell, aka Legacy, was going to be in it. So I don't know. There were a few other title suggestions floating around, and I wasn't in love with any of them, so I suggested this, and that's what we ended up with. And Genis-Vell will be throughout the series, so he's sort of a to greater or lesser extent, he's kind of a sidekick for Surfer in this one.
So was it, and I think I may jump ahead with this question, but I'm just curious because when we originally spoke to you about kind of revisiting these characters, was this planned out, potentially at least? If, obviously the first series was successful, then you had these others to go with?
Not really. Not specifically. I don't know if you guys know this, but comics is a business, and sales somewhat dictate what you get to do.
Okay. All right, good. Okay,
write that down.
Hold on, let me get that.
So the first one came out, sold really well, everybody's happy with it. So we got to the end of it, and they said, well, you want to do another one? Okay. All right. And then I got a call from the editor, Darren Shan, a few weeks later, and he said, hey, we're going to do Warlock Rebirth first and sort of time it to coincide with the release of the movie. And I said, well, okay, just let me know when you want to get around to the Surfer one. And he's like, no, you're writing the Warlock one too. We just want to do that one first, and then another Surfer one afterwards. And can you kind of make them, one big story? And I said, well, that would have been good information to have when I wrote the last issue of the Surfer Rebirth, to leave some dangling threads. But it's not my first rodeo. So went back through the Surfer series and saw where there were some threads that could be played out a little bit more, and some connections that sort of indicated what was going to come next, i.e. Genis-Vell going to Earth to learn about his father's legacy, no pun intended. So that element turned out to be, it was just kind of a throw-in at the end. It was just kind of a, Surfer saying, hey, go to Earth and hang out with those guys. That turned out to be what really provided a connective thread for the next two series.
Makes sense. They got to keep you on your toes. They can't just give you all the information up front to make a cohesive,
Well, I mean, look,
narrative.
I say that sort of tongue in cheek, but that's what the job is sometimes. Sometimes the job is okay, well, these are the cards that we were dealt. How do we turn these cards, how do we turn, a couple of twos and a couple of sevens into a straight flush somehow? But that's actually part of the attraction of the job is putting those puzzle pieces together, figuring out what exactly is going to happen with you come into the thing with some puzzle pieces, no matter what it is. When you're working in a shared universe, you have the pieces that exist already as they have been built up over the last 50 years. So you have that stuff, and then you figure out how they're going to fit together for the particular thing that you're doing. And to me, that's a fun aspect of it. It is sort of like, solving a mystery with Scooby and Shaggy.
Do you get enough Scooby snacks when you solve it the right way?
I sometimes too many Scooby snacks. That's why I drag my ass to the gym every morning. This is a sedentary job. That's the job.
Yeah, I think we all try to get off the chair or couch, as it were, every now and then to keep the muscles limber. Anyway, let's go back to the genesis of the character, Genis-Vell, which was in 1993. You and Ron Lim created the character, I think, for a Silver Surfer annual.
Yeah, number 6.
Yeah, number 6.
Polybag with a trading card.
Ooh,
wow.
It was that era of comics.
Gotta love the unsealable or unable to be unsealed without losing its value era of comics.
That's why we bought 4.
Exactly. I still haven't read it. I don't know what it's about.
I have signed a number of those, like on the plastic in the bag. And I'm like, oh, you want me to sign the plastic? Yeah, sign the plastic. Okay.
Yeah. You didn't make the plastic. But let's go back to the actual beginning, the genesis of the character, as it were. And, these puns are just gonna, or wordplay is just gonna keep coming up. But, this was originally a question for Ron Lim, but I'm curious if you had any input as to the look and costume of the character.
Yeah, I mean, I still have somewhere in the filing cabinet that's part of my office suite here that I've had for forever. I still have the initial character designs that Ron did for Genis, and I think it was pretty close to the first version, but it was the 90s, so he had to have a jacket. I think that was the law then. Give everybody a jacket. So we wanted to obviously, retain the color scheme and elements of his father's costume, because his father's costume kicks ass.
Indeed.
Gil Kane, if I'm not mistaken. But obviously update it to what was contemporary then. Ron did a great design, and the initial, our initial attempt here was to just call him Captain Marvel. I mean, because that whole set of annuals that came out that summer from Marvel, the purpose was to introduce new characters. Like every annual introduced a new character to the Marvel universe. Most all of whom have been completely forgotten. That I know, and I did like 3 of them. So like I'm not casting aspersions on others. I'm casting aspersions on myself and others. That most of them were not very memorable. But legacy has kind of stuck around, and at the time the goal was to allow us to call him Captain Marvel, because there was no Captain Marvel character other than the woman who is now Photon,
Right.
who was in and out of the Avengers a little bit. And so I was, my standpoint was, well, that character doesn't really have anything to do with Captain Marvel. Let us have that name, come up with a new one for her, and you have a Captain Marvel in the Marvel universe again. But that got turned thumbs down from the powers that be, and so we had to come up with a name, and Legacy seemed to be, the most appropriate thing we could come up with.
We'll get to it a little later,
And then eventually
becomes Captain Marvel.
Eventually he becomes known as Captain Marvel, and I didn't get a chance to write that series. I was like, what the fuck, man? Like, what? Like, how? Where I created him? Where's my shot? But all to the good. I mean, the fact that he had a pretty good run of his own was pretty great.
I want to ask one more question about the costume, because I don't know how and I'm curious, both of you, how you would refer to the headpiece that he has, because that was also kind of a 90s thing that I actually kind of loved. I know it's a weird thing. It just basically does not have the covering on the top, kind of like Gambit's. mask, if you will. Would you call that a mask, or would you call it a
I think we
headpiece?
would call it a headpiece.
Headpiece?
Um,
Okay.
and yeah, I have no idea why he's wearing it. It's
Because it looks cool.
it's
Gotta
well,
let the hair
you know,
go through.
it's just it's more 90s weirdness. You know, every era's got its weird stuff. That was the thing back then. And I mean, maybe we can drag Ron on at some point and ask him why he ended up doing that. I mean, it's possible in the character description I wrote, like, do that thing that Gambit's got on his head. I don't think I did, but it's possible.
I'm weirdly fond of those things. Quasar had one at one point, and that won't be the last Quasar reference. But for some reason, that all happened in the 90s. I don't know. Maybe Gambit was the one who really that took off from there. But I don't know. I like those things. I like the hair flowing from the top, but yet having covering the cheeks. Too. I don't know. Anyway, we'll move on.
Yeah, now I'm thinking about it. Superman had that too for a little while. And that Hunter
he did
Prey
in
series.
Some sort of like alternative costume, didn't he?
Yeah, he had a fancy costume to fight Doomsday again.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, he had a sword too, because that's what he needed.
Because Superman needs a sword.
So we are conditioned to have trilogies in our lives. Every series seems to, or at least any big series or movie nowadays, they always kind of create it with the intention of being a trilogy. Is there going to be anything that, will there be closure in this series? Or are we going to see something that maybe leads to something else when this comes to an end?
There will be a sense of closure to this, at least in terms of, the last issue of Warlock Rebirth sort of ended in a cliffhanger almost, because we knew we were doing this, and we knew it was going to come out the month after, and we're just going to roll right into it. As of now, there will be more of a sense of closure at the end of this, and hopefully the whole thing can get collected in one big volume, and it'll kind of hang together as a story. Which isn't to say that again, if somebody further up the ladder than me decides, what, this is going really well, let's just keep doing it, there's plenty of stories to tell. And I would be more than happy to work with Ron at any point on anything. The people that you click with creatively are just, you don't get tired of that. You don't look to move on.
Yeah, they're fun series, and as long as they keep, they harken back to a period that people really enjoyed comics, and I think, you guys are knocking it out of the park. I think they're fun.
Thanks, we're having fun. I mean, that's ultimately our job, is to entertain ourselves, and then hope everybody else comes along for the ride.
Right.
So far, so good, but that's always how I've approached this. Is, well, I'm going to write the story that I want to read, and then hopefully other people want to read it too.
So each of these series has usually a core group of characters, and sometimes they're overlapping, but each one seems to bring more and different characters into their orbit, such as in Warlock, Doctor Strange played a major part, as well as the Infinity Watch characters. Without giving story points away or the totality away, I know the promotional article said something about Galactus, but other than Galactus, or maybe you can just talk about him and why he may show up. What else can you say in terms of other characters that may show up here?
It's almost like a shared universe, Mike.
I never thought of it that way. What if there were multiple universes?
Well, I think that's a little too complicated for the layman. I don't think you could ever do that.
I think you could call it a multiverse.
That's madness, Joe.
Put it in an envelope and send it to yourself, Joe.
So, I mean, like you mentioned Doctor Strange in the Warlock series. I mean, the God's honest truth is Doctor Strange is in there because I wanted to write Doctor Strange. There was really no what role will in this story do we need to have filled? It's just, Doc's cool, and I like the way Ron draws Doc, so let's do that. I mean, that's why Daredevil and Spider-Man show up in issue 4 of Warlock, because we felt like throwing them in there. And I used to love, when I was a kid, I used to love those bits where you would, you'd be reading Spider-Man or Daredevil, and the Human Torch would fly by in the background off on some other adventure. So you got a sense of that this isn't, this is a shared universe. This is a space in which other people interact with each other. Their paths cross, but it doesn't have to be a crossover every time they show up. It could be just that guy flying in the background. So for New Surfer, Galactus appears because, one, he's cool. He looks great when Ron draws him. That's the biggest aspect, is, what is Ron really kick-ass drawing? And the answer is most things. So there's not a let's not have him do that, because he doesn't do that one very well. But it's just, Ron drawing Galactus in a Surfer story is cool. Thanos will appear, because we're not stupid. People like Thanos, and people like Ron's Thanos a lot. And he does, he serves a logical role in the series. So we'll see Warlock and the Infinity Watch again. And there are a few other characters that I think I will keep my mouth shut and will be a surprise. The villain of the series has not been revealed yet. So we're keeping that one we're keeping that one as under wraps as possible. Usually what happens is, like, somebody, 2 weeks before the book comes out, will blow the secret, and then everybody knows what's going on. But this is one of those last page reveals that hopefully makes people go, what?
We won't tell anyone that it's Cosmic Punisher.
That would be cool. Are there any more rebirths coming that we can look forward to?
If I knew, I probably couldn't tell you anyway, but we don't know at this point. I mean, obviously this business works in a fashion of, well, how much did issue 1 sell? That's how the direct market has evolved. How many copies of issue 1 and its multiple covers did we sell? Was it a lot of them? Then that's good, and maybe we do another one, because issue 1 sales are here, and issue 2 sales are here, and there's sales attrition. That's just a natural part of the process, particularly when issue 1 of not just Surfer, but whatever particular series it is, has 5 or 6 or 8 different variant covers, and those sort of bolster the sales. And then issue 2 has 3 different covers, and issue 3 has a couple. So again, publishing is a business. So there are ways that business is done now that sort of dictate whether you do more of this particular thing or not. And hopefully the answer is that we get to do more. I mean, buy a bunch of copies, and they'll probably turn us loose again.
And this is just really from my own knowledge, but are alternate covers really that still big nowadays?
Yeah, well, they're just a natural part of the process now. And I know that there's certainly an element of controversy in all of this. I look at it from the creative standpoint of, well, look, if you want that cover, it's there for you, and if you don't want it, okay, don't buy it. Now, obviously, the gray matter of it, the gray part of it, is if you want that particular cover, your retailer has to buy 25 copies or 50 copies of the book in order to access that one cover. You know, that's a bit more of a, you know, there's a longer discussion to be had about that. And is that healthy overall for the industry, or is it a, you know, is it a stopgap so that the, you know, the retailer can, you know, can charge, you know, 40 or 50 bucks for one issue because it's a much rarer cover. You know, it's the conflict between readers and collectors, and we've always had that in the business. I think it's a little bit more, the camps are a little bit more well defined now because of the, you know, the rare cover kind of stuff that we do. But you know, there's always been that dichotomy. Part of the audience is there to collect, and the rarity of some items is a driver for those fans and for retailers. And you know, another probably larger chunk of the audience is there just to read, is there for the entertainment. And I think you can service both of those communities. It's always a question of how you balance it. You know, I'm thrilled that Surfer #1 is going to have a Frank Miller cover on it. To me, that's really cool. Now,
that is really cool.
Now, ultimately, will I get one of those covers? Probably not. You know, we don't. We, the creators, usually get. You know, our comps are usually, you know, half a dozen of the main cover, and that's it. But just the fact that it exists, and you know, there's a comic out there with you know, with my name on it and a Frank Miller cover on top of it. That's pretty damn cool.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And you never know. Maybe it's like a Cracker Jack prize. You know, when they send out the comps, maybe they'll throw one in if you're lucky.
Yeah, once in a while, you know, the lottery comes up in your favor and you get something like that. But generally, you just get the main covers, and then sometimes you know, sometimes a retailer takes pity on me and sends me one, which is obviously very kind, and I appreciate it.
So I wanted to go back just quickly about characters appearing, because you did bring up something that I was going to bring up about Daredevil and Spider-Man, sort of the extended sequence in Warlock. And we had some, you know, gentle ribbing last time about street level characters, you know, making an appearance, and all of a sudden there they were. Is that something, you know, on your whim or Ron Lim's whim that might happen again?
Yeah, it's possible. I like that stuff just because I like those characters. I like Spider-Man. I love Daredevil. And you know, I was sort of casting about with how am I gonna open this issue? Because generally, I think most writers, but certainly one of my rules is you generally don't want to finish an issue in one spot and then start the next issue in the same spot. Sort of, you know, it's just kind of the expected, and it's kind of dull. So I honestly don't even remember how we finished issue 3 of Warlock. But when I sat down to figure out, well, what are we going to do with issue 4? That's what occurred to me. I'm like, well, let's just do a completely weird thing so that when people open up the book, they go, did I get the right book? Like, what the hell is this? And then, you know, we pull back to reveal there's Doctor Strange's place, and the 2 street level guys are like, yeah, I don't want to mess with that stuff. That's Doc's thing. Let him do that. You want a sandwich? And then, you know, and then we transition into the rest of our story. So was it a little self-indulgent? Yeah, probably. But you know, I get to do that because they hired me to write it. When they hire you to write Silver Surfer, you know, and you don't put Spider-Man and Daredevil in if you don't want them there. So, but I did, you know, send a note to the editor and say, hey, look, this is what I'm thinking. Is that cool? And he's like, yeah, okay. you know, it's God, if if you're doing this thing and you can't have fun, why are you doing it?
Sure. Does Lim ever make any suggestions? Like, I'm really feeling like drawing so and so this
Ron
month.
is the most easygoing guy ever, and is generally up for anything. Like when we in the first Surfer series, when we had the sequence with like 5 different versions of Surfer, for lack of a better term, a Kirby Surfer, a Buscema Surfer, an All Red Surfer, and a Mobius Surfer, plus a Ron Lim Surfer. I got in touch with Ron and I said, look, this is what I'm thinking. And if you're up for it, I think it's going to be really cool. But it's going to require you to, basically draw in somebody else's style for those figures. Are you cool with that? And he was like, yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. So yeah, Ron is amenable to damn near anything, which probably gets him into trouble more often than not. Because in the first Surfer series, we had Jack of Hearts show up. And that was actually a request from the editor. He's like, can we, you guys did Jack of Hearts in a number of different issues in your run. Can you get him into this series? And I said, yeah, okay. And the role that Jack of Hearts filled in the first Surfer Rebirth was actually intended for Gladiator from the Shi'ar, from the Shi'ar Legion of Superheroes, basically. Because I love that character. Gladiator looks cool. He's Superman. So
the Mohawk
it was my intention to get him into the story, just because I really dig that character. And when the editor made the request to get Jack of Hearts in there, I was like, okay, well, I'll pull Gladiator out and we'll put Jack in. But I said, look, we got to check with Ron, because that costume's a bitch to draw and he's got to sign off on it. And I checked with Ron and he was like, yeah, okay, we can put Jack of Hearts in there. And then after we were done with it, he was like, oh man, drawing that Jack of Hearts costume sucks. Because it's just, there's no way to draw it quickly. It's all just noodly detail. And, it's a George Perez costume in every sense of the word.
So, getting back to comics and their influence on the MCU, are you hoping maybe that Legacy will jump to the MCU in some form? I mean, I guess it might be difficult considering Marvel didn't really get established in the traditional sense, but could it be a possibility, or what's your thoughts on that?
That is such a separate aspect of Marvel that I have no idea. Sure, it would be great. I mean, I'd get a check. That's cool. That would be good.
You're in this to make money? What?
Well, it's nice to be able to do this for a living.
Yeah.
And frankly, look, all bullshit aside, it's nice to be compensated for something that you brought into the world.
Right.
So, because that doesn't always happen. So yeah, it would be great if Legacy winds up in a movie somewhere. I don't know that it might be a little too inside baseball to make. Well, there was the Captain Marvel, but it wasn't really our Captain Marvel, and so now there's it's some of this the minutia that we get into in the comics doesn't really translate as well outside the comics in some ways. Obviously, like all of the crazy multiverse stuff and the Doctor Strange and Spider-Man movies, and like if you had told me, even 10 years ago that's the kind of stuff we'd be putting up on the big screen, and that the audience would show up for it and get it, and I would have told you were nuts. But that's how far the movie story making has come.
In a relatively short period of time, too.
Yeah. I mean, it's like it used to be that the only place you could get those stories was comics.
Right.
Like the only place you could get Thanos destroying the universe was comics, and you know, we didn't have the special effects technology to show. We, you know, that stuff, comics was the only place. It was our secret at the time. And then, you know, and then the digital technology caught up with what we could, you know, do with a pencil and paper. And now the storytelling muscles of both the Marvel and DC universes, with multiple universes and multiple versions of characters and all of that stuff, has also caught up with the mainstream. You know, and the mainstream kind of gets it, which boggles my mind. So yeah, I mean, the world has completely embraced, you know, the kind of stuff that only us geeks knew about 20 years ago, which is kind of cool. It's, you know, it's nice to have the tent be that much bigger.
Be cool if I went through high school now.
Yeah,
people would have been like, "Oh, you know, yeah."
Wouldn't have to hide those comics behind an algebra textbook.
Exactly.
So you referenced this before, which is, you know, Peter David's run on Legacy, who became Captain Marvel. And I'm just curious, I know you probably, you know, obviously have some, you know, difficulty with them not approaching you to write that series, which is very understandable. But did you actually read the series, and what did you think of it? And were there any kernels in there that you thought was interesting, or just totally not where you would have taken the character?
It was fun stuff, and it was certainly you know, like exactly the stuff that Peter does. You know, it's a very Peter David comic.
Yeah.
Which I think is, you know, is appropriate in the context. So yeah, I mean, it's not exactly what I would have done, but nor should it be. Like, if it was exactly what I would have done, they would have hired me. Although I think, honestly, like the editorial turnover at that time, I mean, there are real world reasons why this stuff happens.
Yeah.
Is you know, there was enough editorial turnover at the time that most of the editorial staff that was there in the early to mid 90s ended up out the door because of staff cuts and declaring bankruptcy and all of that stuff. So basically, you have a whole new editorial crew in there. And I would think that mostly nobody knew that I had created the character, or at least the, you know, the editors involved were not, you know, not everybody knows everything, right? Not everybody knows where stuff comes from or who created them or whatever. They're just, you know, like most editors, they're just looking to, you know, how do I get these books out on time? That's the main thing. So yeah, it would have been great to, you know, actually go back and work more with the character that I created, but that didn't happen. It's not a big deal.
What do you think about
I was over ruining Green Lantern at DC, so
yeah, exactly. There was one aspect of it that I was more curious about than others, which is the sort of two characters, two people, one body thing. So he, you know, I think Genis-Vell and Rick Jones sort of shared, and they just sort of switched off. What did you think of that concept? Is that something that sometimes works, sometimes doesn't? Is it
I think obviously it was sort of traditional from Marvel and Rick Jones back in the 60s.
Right. Yeah.
And, you know, even more than that, it's more traditional for Billy Batson and Captain Marvel. I mean, that's where the two people, one body really comes from. Is, you know, that's the kind of Captain Marvel that the original Captain Marvel was. So I think it's a cool aspect to the character, and obviously they're doing something like that in the Marvels movie, where the various and sundry characters switch places. I think it's all fun.
Another nerdy kind of question. I guess they're all nerdy, but specifically, you know, as I'm looking at this character and compared to others within that cosmic realm, you know, you have these bands, right? So I believe Genis-Vell has the quantum bands, right? And I think Quasar had the Nega Bands and stuff. You know, what
other way around? I think.
Is it the other way around? Okay, apologies. I'm not even sure what my question is, but do you think those are sort of crutches or MacGuffins to a certain extent, or do you think they have a role to play in the actual
No,
character?
they're just toys like, Thor's hammer or Green Lantern ring, or, it's just some of the, some of the cool toys that we have. Like, Nicholson's Joker said, where do you get these toys? Those kind of toys are part of the fabric of comics. So, and I generally feel like, nothing is really a crutch unless you treat it that way. They're all just tools for storytelling. Those kind of toys, continuity, past history, all of that stuff is there for the creative teams to use, and hopefully not get the creative teams don't get used by that stuff. You don't bow down to the continuity in such minute detail that you're not telling exciting stories.
I tend to, well, it depends on the writer, I think, and it doesn't sound like because I think some writers go for that stuff, and that, as in the, getting into the backstory and the minutia and the specific power set of even like these objects and things that.
I mean, I don't give a shit. I mean, that's, and I'm not saying it's wrong for anybody to give a shit, but I don't like. I'm not interested in stories that take place between panels 3 and 4 of page 17 of an issue of Avengers from 35 years ago. That's not why I read stories. I do understand that there are people that do read stories for those reasons, and they want that that huge tapestry to make sense as a giant storytelling device. I mean, I've peeked behind the curtain, and I know that that's never going to make sense as a giant storytelling device because there are too many people involved. There are too many variables. But that that is a school of comic writing that sort of. I think Roy Thomas probably was the one who really brought it into mainstream comics because he grew up a fan and then applied that knowledge and that skill set of a fan to writing these stories. So you had, a lot of stuff that was really continuity dependent and, really filled in gaps between stories and all that kind of stuff. And there is certainly an audience for that. And that audience should be served as well. We shouldn't do all of those kinds of stories, just like we shouldn't do all of any other kind of stories.
Yeah, it's part of the diversity of storytelling.
And, it's a buffet table. You pick what you want.
Yeah.
If you want those kinds of stories, there are writers who do those and do them well, and you can get your helping from them. And then there are other writers who don't do that and will tell you a story in a different way. And I think it's up to the reader to figure out what works for you, and then to pursue those things on the racks.
So no Nega Bands Rebirth in the office.
No, we're not going to get into the a lot of times I'll get asked, well, when did you have to go back and take over a series, and did you have to go back and read the entire run, and how much did you have to research? And the real answer is I researched enough to make you think that I did all the research. But I didn't. Because to me, making up stuff is more important and exciting than just rehashing what's come before. I think to me, the greatest example of that is Stan and Jack's run on FF, which was 100+ issues, and there were some recurring things, but generally they just created new shit. They mostly Jack, here's Galactus and the Silver Surfer, and here's the Inhumans, and it was something new all the time. And let's bring Dr. Doom back fairly regularly because people like him. I mean, to me, that's the way you do an extended run. Is you start with a sandbox and then you build a much bigger sandbox as you go.
So before we go, like we always do you have anything else coming up that we can look forward to from you? That you can share?
I've got pages from an artist buddy over there that I can't show you.
I think I know who
Let's
that
see.
is.
What have I got? I don't. There's a bunch of stuff that I can't tell you.
I think I know who the artist buddy is, by the way. I interviewed him last week.
Did you?
Yes. PP.
Well, that sounds like a personal problem, but
Jeez, I gotta go. I gotta be right back.
yeah, that's the guy.
All right, cool. In like Flynn. All right. Well, we will discuss that when it comes out.
Cool. I'm having a ball doing that. Actually, well, let's not be coy. I can't tell you what it is, but I can tell you that the artist is Paul Pelletier.
I know what it is.
And Paul Pelletier, obviously I've been buddies with Paul since the 90s when he jumped onto Green Lantern to help out, to basically be the other regular penciler along with Darryl Banks. And Paul came here for Albany Comic-Con back in June. And we went to the driving range to hit a couple of buckets of golf balls and then have a beer on the patio afterwards. And we're just shooting the shit. And he said, "Hey, you got anything like fun I can draw?" And I said, "Well, I got this thing." And he's like, "Oh, I'll do that." So we put that together, and he is drawing it as we speak, and that'll get announced at some point. I'm not sure when exactly. So there's that. There's a number of things that I have going on, and I'm also still I'm on the narrative team for Diablo for Blizzard.
Yes, you mentioned that last time. Yeah. Those are large, long scope, big scope projects.
Yeah, I've been working in the Blizzard franchise for 2+ years now. And so when I came into it, when they asked me to join the team, they had already been working on Diablo 4, which is out now, for like 3 years. 3 years of like active development, and a year or two before that of, sort of developing where it was going to go and look of things and all that. It's a very different turnaround than comics. Comics, we do the thing, finish it, and like a month later it's on the stands. Games, you're talking 4 or 5 years of development, and then you have seasons and expansions, and comparatively those come quickly. But it's such a different pace than comics. It's cool to be doing both, because you get a sense of they're kind of two different skill sets. Comics are very much your story, and you get together with a handful of people and you make the thing. And games are you and 600 other people, and somehow the whole thing comes together at the end. Everybody does their part. Everybody is pulling on an oar in the same direction, and you produce this frankly multi-million-dollar franchise. It's still kind of magical to me. I mean, this, like how do we actually, I write this scene, and then literally a bunch of other people work on the storyboards and the cinematics and the animation of it, and then months and months later I get to see the scene that I wrote, and the characters that I wrote, like walking and talking, and have probably been in the voiceover sessions with the actors to work on how the how the lines are delivered. It's just, it's a really cool process. It's just different than what we do in comics, and they're both really satisfying, but just in different ways.
Do you have to write in the players' movements or anything into what you do? Because, like, what you kind of, and correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't played a video game in a little while. You write a lot of like the overarching story in those cutscenes, right?
Yeah.
Now, do you have to write in or kind of work in how the player, I don't know, fights, or like all like the punchy
Well, if it's
stabby stuff?
a cut scene or a cinematic scene, that's stuff that we're writing basically like a movie. It's a movie script. And then we understand, okay, there's the player is going to do this fight scene, and and if they survive that, they're going to come out the other end, and then this scene is going to unfold in front of them. So
Okay.
there's a lot of different things that you do in the narrative role. In comics, I'm the god of comics, right? Like I and the artist decide what happens and how it happens, and you guys are a passive audience. Like,
Right.
You're passive in the sense that you don't affect how the story goes, right? You fill in what happens between the panels.
Mhm.
Like that's where there's sort of the Vulcan mind meld of comics is, I have this thing in my head and we put it on the page, and then it gets into your head and you fill in the gaps. That's, to me, really a really cool aspect of what we do. In a game, it's a
Choose your own adventure.
it's you the player are doing things within the story. So we want to move you through the story so that you have a full narrative experience. Like you get a story out of it, and hopefully people feel like they got a story out of Diablo 4 that was affecting, that had some real emotional weight to it. Because that was the goal. That was to make you feel something. So it's a fine line to walk between that interactive nature of the player, deciding what to do and what battles to fight and where they want to go, and designing the whole thing in such a way that whatever decisions the player makes, they're still going to get like the emotional content of the story we're telling.
Cool. It's interesting.
It's the same job in that we're telling stories, right? This is
Right.
So at its core, both jobs are about telling a story. The method in which you tell that story is somewhat different, but the job is the same, and the tools you use to tell them are different. But I like them both.
It's interesting what goes into that. I mean, just watching, I've seen like behind the scenes of creating other video games and things like that, and like the last games I played were the Arkham games, the Batman Arkham games, which I thought were just amazing, and to see what went into them between from concept to recording the voiceovers to the animation and the building of the actual design work, it's astounding, and it kind of makes sense like why it takes so long sometimes in between them. And it's astonishing how sometimes it's clear when companies half-ass it to crank it out, and the product shows that they did a poor job.
Yeah, and look, nobody sets out to do a poor job ever, right? Like the comics, video games, nobody decides, you know what, let's just shit this thing out and move on to the next one. Everybody busts their ass as much as they can to make the thing as good as they can, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And the degree to which it works is it's kind of the audience's to decide. Once in a while you see some reaction to comics where it's like, oh, these this creative team just shit it out, and and didn't really put the effort in. That's bullshit. Like, the comics are hard. Like, doing comics, particularly the art, is hard, and it's time consuming, and people work themselves to a nub to do these things. Nobody sets out to go, you know what, I'm just gonna do a shitty job and then I'll move on to the next one. Nobody does that, because this is too hard, and everybody that does it loves it too much to just do the bare minimum and move on. Sometimes stuff works and sometimes it doesn't, but it's never from a lack of caring or a lack of effort within the boundaries of the time constraints that you're given.
Now, Earl, sorry, and Mike, I know you have you have your next thing, but I just wanted to. I find this part of it interesting. The team that creates the stuff, are they located in New York, or are they like L.A. or Canada?
For Diablo?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all over the place. There's a Blizzard studio here in Albany. There is has been a video game producer for 25 years, I think, maybe 30 years, in different variations, and now it is a Blizzard studio. Blizzard is located, the headquarters is a campus in Irvine, California.
Oh, okay.
Multiple building, obviously Blizzard's a large company and they do a lot of games. And there's a lot of people that work there. So I've never actually been to the Irvine campus. Someday I hope to visit the Irvine campus. They have a Starbucks in-house. That'd be cool. Which isn't to say we don't like the amenities at the office here are pretty awesome too. So it's literally, there's an office here, there's an office in Irvine, there's an office in Austin. There are other places around the world where stuff gets done, and then there are people who are scattered around the globe that work on it too. So it's literally the team that works on Diablo like full time is probably 600 people, and then the team that supports them, quality assurance and HR and all of those aspects that go along with having a real company, is hundreds of more people. So you can look at the credits at the end of Diablo 4, and there's probably 1,000 people there. Everybody who had some impact on the game, even if it's the payroll that made sure that we all got paid on time, or HR that deals with your healthcare package or whatever. Like, those people get their name in the game too, because they contributed as well.
Right.
Which I think is a really cool thing that Blizzard does and not all companies do.
Yeah, I mean, these teams are as big, if not bigger, than those that make movies, including those CGI heavy movies. And the credits just roll and roll and roll. And you're right, sometimes the support team doesn't get as much credit as the main creators, but they enable the creation of the work to happen. And if it's taking 3 years, there's obviously people behind the people. So it's great that they get the credit that they're due.
It's an army, really. It's and frankly, it's probably more people than work on a lot of movies, because it's such a long-term process, and there's so much content that goes into a game. I'm really pleased to be working with them, and I'm really pleased to be working with the people that I work with. I'm constantly kind of blown away by the level of work that everybody on the Diablo team does, from the artists to the animators to lighting, and the whole thing where this is a fully realized world, and these are fully realized characters, and it's there aren't any shortcuts taken.
Well, we're certainly looking forward to that. I mean, that has to be like 100 comics coming out at one time, as much as you get sort of the the benefit and the good feelings of a comic book coming out after years and hundreds of people working on it. I bet the release is quite festive and fulfilling, I'd say, for all of you creators.
Yeah, I'm glad that I have the comic stuff to do, because obviously that's the pace that I'm used to working at, and sort of the release pace that I'm used to working at. But also just the sense of we did the thing and we put it out, and you'll get another one next month. That you sort of mark time by that schedule. And I work with people in the Diablo franchise with that. They didn't put anything out for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
There's no sense of accomplishment or satisfaction like you get from your book hits the stands and somebody on social media tells you they liked it. That's cool. You for a lot of the people in games, you work in anonymity for a lot of years before you finally get to put the thing out and hand it to people and say, this is the thing that I did.
And we're back. So what did you guys think of that? Like I said, great interview, right? Patting ourselves on the old shoulder there. All right. It was
I also
fun.
thought it was good.
Yeah, it was. See? No, it was. I love talking to Ron. He's always has a number of plates spinning, and he's just so fun to talk to because this stuff never gets old. He never gets tired of working on this type of content, and it's great. And we talk about on camera and off camera too, some of the other projects he has going on, and he just has a lot of passion for what he does, and it's great talking to him.
Absolutely. We definitely missed not having Ron Lim around, who has been the past couple times for the other Rebirth series, but Ron Marz held his own. Of course, we also didn't have Oren, but we held our own. I thought it was, a captivating conversation as always. And towards the end, we really got into a lot about what goes into making video games, which is an area that I'm not too familiar with. And it just sounds like an army of people that works on this thing every day for years before these projects come out. So I thought it was very illuminating to hear about that process. But that will do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening and viewing. Please remember, as always, to rate 5 stars, review, and subscribe. Go to dollarbinbandits.buzzsprout.com. Click that support button. Subscribe to Dollar Bin Boosters. Help us out. Help us bring more of these interviews straight into your ear holes, as I say. And thank you again. We will see you next time.